Previously on InnerZension Radio.
Basically, people came to participate in a study on anxiety, and they were asked to mark their level of anxiety when they came into the clinic. And then they were told, you're going to get in the float tank, you can get out any time, or we will get you out after an hour. And then they were asked to mark their level of anxiety when they came out. And the people with generalized anxiety disorder had a lower level of anxiety after they came out of the float tank than normal people before the float.
Welcome to InnerZension Radio.
And we are back with Nate Terrell. He's a therapist of over 40 years, a licensed social worker out in New Jersey with a great book. We talked about, if you missed it last time, go look up his podcast called Achieving Selfcompassion. And we probably called it Achieving Inner Peace Through Self-Compassion. But anyway, he's agreed to come back on the show, and we're going to talk about suffering and hopefully come to some good suggestions about how you and I and all the listeners can suffer with inner peace, if that's even possible. Do you think, Nate, is that even possible?
Yes. We're all human beings, and we all have primitive emotions, fear. Most of us have experienced some levels of trauma in our lives. We have medical, physical ups and downs. We have bodily pain. We have loss if we lose a child, or my beloved bulldog died. We had to put him down a couple months ago. Suffering is inevitable in the course of a lifetime. I have a favorite aunt who's 91, has severe back pain, and she's suffering greatly, but it has not taken away her spark, her joy of life. I think the distinction is we can make the choice not to judge it. We can make the choice to be good to ourselves and other people despite the pain that we're experiencing. And we can recognize that even though we're suffering, it's not who we are. Our suffering is something that's happening to us, but it doesn't mean we don't have a whole level of consciousness. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on this topic.
Well, don't you think that it's almost like, if we're not careful, the act of suffering brings us deeply rooted into this material world, away from what you kind of referred to as more of the esoteric, which is we are maybe not all material. We are not all physical. There's another essence to us that is beyond the physical.
Right.
One would also have to ask whether or not there's some sort of purpose to the suffering.
Right.
Do we just suffer in vain? And then I'm also wondering if it's a repeating suffering. And repeating sufferings have other ideas, other annotations attached to them, such as the idea of karma, etc.
Well,
now, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we could certainly learn lessons from suffering, but I would never say that to anybody, because I think it's so hard for people that are going through difficult times to say, oh, you'll learn lessons. That sounds so trite and glib at points, but of course we can learn lessons. I'll give you an example. I had a stent about 6 years ago. I had a 99% blockage in my heart. I foolishly walked around with chest pains for a couple of weeks and eventually went to a cardiologist, and he took an EKG, and I was on my way to the hospital in an ambulance, and I had a stent. And a lot of things I used to worry about before that, I don't worry about anymore. 2 doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. Well, a couple of years later, I went to my local doctor, and he did an EKG, and he misread it, and he thought I had a heart attack. Next thing you know, I'm in a hospital room on a gurney. It was flu season. The place was jam-packed. Nurses were screaming at each other. I didn't think I had a heart attack, but part of me was suffering tremendously. Part of me was thinking, like, what a situation. Here I am in the hospital again. They're taking my blood to see if I had a heart attack. They couldn't find a room, etc. I was amazed, though, that on a deeper level, I tuned into my authentic self that could observe this experience. I said to myself, wow, like, here you are. Like, and it's weird. I can't put it into words. I found a place of peace and acceptance that transcended everything I was going through. I wouldn't have chosen it. I wouldn't have wished it for anybody else. But I thought to myself, wow, let me experience this. What's this like to be afraid you're going to die? And then I started thinking about death and what's so scary about death, and and thinking about ego. And I won't spend the whole program talking about it, but I really had an epiphany. All of a sudden, I wasn't afraid anymore. I could just kind of lay back on the sort of the gurney I was on, and I thought, like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But this doesn't define me. This doesn't define my world. It's hard to put into words. It's a very esoteric notion, but it profoundly changed me.
In ACT therapy, we have this concept of the avoidance or the fear of something actually creates the suffering.
Exactly.
In other words, it's not the person yelling at me, making me feel like crap. It's my interpretation of it, or my resistance to the anger of the past, my resistance to the fear of something. If I'm resisting the feeling or the sensation of fear itself, it might easily turn into a panic attack.
Exactly.
Fear of fear. And,
exactly.
Exacerbating the very problem that I'm trying to avoid.
Exactly.
Now, also in this concept is the body communicating to you? So you talked about chest pains. We talk about pain in the body. These are the body's way of communicating that there is something wrong. And if you listen closely, it's not, it is suffering, but it's more of a communication. It's
exactly.
the body telling you exactly what's wrong.
Exactly. And for me, I'm a big fan of Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now, and he writes a lot about transcending the ego. And when I asked myself, well, why is that? I want to live forever. I love life. I'm very fortunate for everything I have in my life. But I also thought to myself, well, is this just sort of self-importance? People have been dying for 100,000, human beings have been dying as long as we've been alive. And I'm not saying I wanted to die, but once I overcame my fear of death, and I'm not saying it was easy, it sort of freed me up. And, it freed me up. But it's hard to put in to words, but there was a level of acceptance. Certainly there was a level of acceptance. Anxiety is fear to a large extent, because people feel a little bit panicky and they think, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. This is terrible. I can't stand this. Why does this always happen to me? And their heart starts beating. Mm-hmm. If the minute they felt the panic attack, they could say to themselves, wow, okay, I'm having a panic attack. I'm not going to die from it. It's not the end of the world. What do I need to do? They can do deep breathing. They can meditate. They can be mindful. They can use that as a window of opportunity, I guess, to maybe take better care of themselves.
Can you choose to not suffer?
We can choose not to focus on the pain.
Is that avoiding?
When I'm in physical pain, like years ago, I was playing this indoor hockey at a school I was working at, and I thought I'd broken my thumb, and I'm driving home, and I could spike the pain. I could say to myself, this is terrible. Wow, this really, really hurts. I can't stand this. Maybe I need to go to the hospital. Or I said to myself, it's not the end of the world. Now, I'm not suggesting that works in every situation. I've worked with clients with terrible chronic back pain, and they're on all sorts of major opiates, and I really feel for them. I'm not saying it's always easy, but we can choose how much we focus on pain or not. And paradoxically, as you say, sometimes when we accept it, it dissipates a little bit. We don't fight it. We don't have judgments about it.
That is all ACT therapy. Acceptance and commitment therapies apparently studied with chronic body pain. And these people in their studies have gone to their surgeries and they've done the opiate thing and nothing seems to work. And so they end up at the psychotherapy office to do some test on that. And lo and behold, and this also happens with other things like tinnitus or ringing in the ears or some other chronic problem, is, okay, fine, I can't get rid of it. How do I work with it so that it doesn't keep me from living a productive, rich, meaningful life? And with those procedures, these people tend to notice that the pain actually goes down.
Yes.
And part of acceptance and commitment is what the name implies, acceptance. As we struggle to fight against the pain, which causes muscular tension, the tension causes more pain and exacerbates, that suffering.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the concept there. And the acceptance is the opposite, is kind of relaxing. In order for body pain to stop suffering, we need to figure out a way to relax the body.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be a paramount way. Strangely, some detox in there is important too. There's toxins that can get trapped in fat cells, muscle cells.
Right.
Keep the tension going. The work of John Sarno, Dr. John Sarno, and he talks about repressed rage comes out as debilitating back pain.
Exactly.
And that's where, we talked last time, I think we talked a little bit about repression, not extensively, but that is one of the downsides to just stuffing down your emotions, particularly the big ones like anger and rage and hate. And it tends to come out later in the form of, back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain. This is according to Sarno, not me. But I've seen it in a lot of my clients. I work with addicted folks. Some of those are opiates. And so in order to come off the opiates, we do have to deal with not only emotional turmoil from the past, but chronic body pain. If nothing else, if they didn't get started on opiates because of body pain, they sure are having body pain now coming off the opiates. Right. It just hurts.
Yeah, an example of, in terms of emotional pain, is I have a friend I went to college with. I only see her at reunions, but about 25 years ago, her daughter was working in a mental health facility, and a man with emotional problems came in and shot her daughter. And I saw her at a recent reunion. This is 25, maybe 30 years later. And I said, can I ask you about this? And she said, sure. I was pretty good friends with her back in college. I said, how have you coped? How have you dealt with this? And she said exactly what we're talking about. She said, the pain doesn't go away, but you learn to live around it. You learn that you don't want to be a hostile. But many of the people who've been through the most, she put a lot of her energy into working for, have often developed the greatest inner peace because they've realized, inauguration, she's very active, that they can't allow with gun control. So like a lot of people develop or take over pain to dominate their existence. But I really understand her point. It's not, she can't do anything to diminish the pain of tragically losing her daughter in young adulthood. But she doesn't have to allow that experience to dictate the sort of human being she is, how well she takes care of herself, how loving she is to her friends and family. It doesn't have to define her. Now, I haven't walked in her shoes, and if she walked around angry all the time, I wouldn't judge her for that. I mean, people have been through tremendous trauma, but many of the people who've been through the most intense trauma have often developed the greatest inner peace because they've realized that they can't allow that trauma to envelop them, to take over, to dominate their existence. It's just too painful. It's almost like survival mode. It's
almost like that trauma is coming down like a blanket to cover them, and they continually push that off and in very explosive manner. But in that explosion, they're going to do they're making change in the world based on this trauma, which gives it meaning. It gives it, I hate the word purpose in this case, but very existential, purposeful action. I'm not going to let this blanket of trauma cover me. I'm going to make big, powerful change in the world, which in turn give me a sense of, clarity, satisfaction. Like you said, inner peace. I would imagine that it produces kind of a flow in your mind. You're just doing your work. You're not, I'm just honoring my son that I've lost, or but it is very purposeful, the action and the behavior after that, instead
Absolutely.
of wallowing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done.
Yeah, it's interesting. The three presidents in my lifetime, at least, who I think have been perhaps the most beloved, Clinton, Reagan, and Obama, all had alcoholic fathers. Obama
Oh,
only
really?
saw his father for a month, and
They
it doesn't
all
make
have
the
pain
pain
about
go
this, and
away.
I'm more familiar
It's
with
not
Obama 'cause I've
absolving the
read his
pain.
book,
He's just
etc.
chosen not to allow
But
the pain.
they were able to
to
not
turn
let
him into a
that
bitter,
suffering,
angry person.
you know,
And
they
those are the
also had
people I
wives that
think
adored them,
I
which
most
made a
admire.
big
And
difference.
that's the paradox.
But
Many of the
history is
happiest
replete
people I
with
know
examples
have
of
been through the
people.
most
The
difficult
Dalai Lama,
circumstances.
you know, the Chinese kicked him out. He's been living in northern India all of these years. And somebody asked him, well, how can you not be rageful towards the Chinese? They destroyed so many monasteries and they've tried to ruin his culture. And he smiled, his beautiful smile, and he said, they've taken everything from my people. Why would I give them my happiness? And
Mm.
talk about a man that's been able to turn a pain into positivity. It doesn't make the pain go away. It's not absolving the pain. He's just chosen not to allow the pain to turn him into a bitter, angry person. And those are the people I think I most admire. And that's the paradox. Many of the happiest people I know have been through the most difficult circumstances.
Mm. Yeah, so there has to be some sort of transition from deep suffering. I don't think these people are just pretending to be happy. I suppose it's possible, but you're talking about the genuinely peaceful, happy people who've been through
Yes.
trauma. So that how long is that process? It's different for everyone, but
I think it's a decision. I think it's a choice. I think they have to be able to talk through some of the trauma, and I'm sure they have difficult moments. But I don't, and I've had an easier life certainly than the Dalai Lama or many of these other people. Um, Although I would love to know the Dalai Lama now. But I will say this: I don't want to let anything take away my peace and happiness. And I sometimes wonder, what if I get Alzheimer's? What if I wind up in a wheelchair? One of my biggest fears is like hurting and killing a pedestrian. I mean, not that I would be driving, I have all these fears, but I say to myself, please don't let anything take away your peace and happiness. Nothing in the outside world, including the fear of death, overcoming the fear of death. People who live in fear of death never realize a genuine happiness because they're always living in fear.
Mhm. And that's kind of a human ego natural state, right? Is looking for threats, looking for threats. Is that going to kill me? Is that going to kill me?
Exactly.
And in today's day and age, yes, people do get killed, but the violence is actually down. You would never know it if you watched TV, but
Right.
wars are down, violence is down, everything's down. People are still dying, don't get me wrong. Tragedy still happens, but the tigers aren't out there eating us alive. Disease is down. We're living longer. Now that's another concept. We're living longer. I have been spending some time in the geriatric unit. So you got these really older people who are losing their minds. What if, wow, what if you're not suffering because you're not really here, but you're making everyone else suffer because they have to take care of you? Well, I see that every day. What if we're just blissfully going along, inner peace, doing our thing? Meanwhile, we're just oblivious to all these people that we're making suffer.
Well, I guess the distinction is if we have Alzheimer's and we're not consciously doing anything to cause harm, we're doing the best we can, I guess. But I guess the most important distinction, perhaps, of all of this is that, yes, we all can choose inner peace. We all can choose self-compassion. We can choose self-love. And none of us ever has the right to do anything that's hurtful, that's mean,
Right.
that causes somebody else to be deprived of opportunity. We have that social responsibility. We can't say, gee, I loved myself so much I went and robbed a bank.
Right.
That's
right.
very, very, very important. It's a lot of people feel anger, angst from their past. It doesn't give us license to yell and scream at the clerk at the convenience store or to kick the dog when we get home. And people that do those things don't have self-love anyway. I mean, how can you love yourself when you're being mean to other people?
Right.
But as passionately as I care about
having, self-compassion and self-love and finding inner peace and meditation, I think I care even more passionately about not doing anything in this world that's unfair to our fellow human beings. And it's inevitable that we all say things that maybe are less sensitive. I mean, unknowingly. I mean, we can't always be, highly sensitive to every situation. But I'm very passionate about that. For sure. That's what keeps the world going. We need as many people as possible with that level of commitment.
Well, I think we also have a commitment to preventing from us making other people suffer through like mental deterioration, for example. I mean, there are choices that you can make to stave off Alzheimer's,
right,
or, just by taking care of yourself. This goes back to your book that we talked about last time, which is the self-love, self-acceptance, taking care of yourself, filling up your energy bank before you go deal with everyone else. But there are so much of us that don't do either. They're not taking care of themselves or taking care of others. And there's suffering in that.
Without a doubt. And of course, I mean, I don't know. I mean, with Alzheimer's, my dad had Alzheimer's. I don't know how much he could have controlled or not. I guess for me, if I ever get Alzheimer's, I still want to be as peaceful and loving a person as I can be. And I've always thought if I could find a place of peace inside myself, maybe I can go there. Maybe I won't be able to function very much in the outside world, but maybe I can find a peaceful place. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'll get Alzheimer's and I'll wind up being, I don't know. I can't foresee the future.
Well, I think since we're on this topic, I'll just throw out what I've learned over the years. My grandmother died of Alzheimer's, and I picked up a book in the early 90s on this issue, how to prevent Alzheimer's, like how to prevent it. You can prevent it. And the top one was exercise, just getting sheer energy through the brain, or blood through the brain. And of the top exercises for preventing Alzheimer's was weightlifting.
Right.
For some reason, that gets the most blood up through there. And then, this was the early 90s. I recommended some aspirin protocols, but I didn't follow that one because there was some research after that shows some deteriorating effects of other things in the body. I think it was, I can't remember. Was it kidneys? I can't remember. But there was the right kind of foods, cruciferous, whatever the
right. Plant-based diet,
broccoli,
right.
Plant-based diet, fats, healthy fats, omega-3, 6, and 9,
right.
Fish oils, coconut oil. Look up coconut oil. I've seen some anecdotal evidence that people can come back from Alzheimer's,
yes.
Maybe not completely, but they can at least improve their ability to draw a clock through the use of coconut oil. I've seen that for Parkinson's. I've seen it, some studies done for an alcoholic's brain, which looks very similar to dementia. And we're just, all these are basically a loss of brain material. But if you've got a healthy brain, then you have a good sense of inner peace.
Without a doubt. And this is why I'm so committed. I'm pretty much vegan. I do occasionally have chicken or fish, but I don't have any sugars. I don't do any oils. I basically follow the Eat to Live diet. I'm not telling anybody else that they should live their life, but basically I have a large salad midday, and that's pretty much what I eat. And the interesting thing is I don't experience very much hunger. I'm obsessed with keeping my cholesterol low, having almost died of a blockage 5 years ago. I try to exercise as much as I can. And it's these things, just like the mental health stuff we've talked about, are just habits. They're just habits. And I don't judge anybody else for how they eat, but I know for me, at least, I feel great. I take lots of different supplements. I keep up again with my health as much as I can. But I'm fortunate. I have good medical coverage and I have the money to buy supplements. Not everybody does, but you're right. I mean, we can eliminate a lot of toxins by eliminating metals in our systems. I'm obsessed with all of this stuff. I'm not a doctor, but I want to live forever. I love life. I want to be as healthy as I can be.
Right. And, I think there's another place out in Arizona. I won't go through too much detail, but their big thing is not the length of life, but your quality of life while you're living. So you don't want to be on life support for 20 years.
Right.
You'd rather, whatever your life expectancy is, that's your useful life also.
Right.
So no matter how long you're living, is it useful years? That's important to me. And in order to do that, you've got to have a healthy brain. I like the work of Dr. Amen, Amen, seems to have some really solid stuff for brain health. I think brain health is absolutely critical for
Right.
inner peace.
Right.
So, in a nutshell, then, suffering. It's a big umbrella of topics. Let's nail down your biggest obstacles to inner peace from a suffering standpoint.
I would say trying to eliminate suffering is one of the biggest reasons for suffering. The world's imperfect. Stuff happens. People get diseases. People are hit by cars and all sorts. There's most people, if they live into their 90s, have some medical problems. We cannot eliminate suffering. It's just part of life. We lose children. We lose spouses. We lose parents. We lose beloved pets. People lose careers. Suffering is inevitable. But what we can all strive to do is not to exacerbate our suffering through the narratives we say, tell ourselves about it. We exacerbate it if we allow it to make us miserable, unhappy people. We exacerbate it if we walk around feeling like victims or nobody understands us or we have the worst thing in the world. Maybe we can find other people that are suffering in the same way we can. Maybe we can find ways to support them. So yes, the point of life is not to eliminate suffering. The point of life, I think, in many ways, is to accept suffering as gracefully as we can and know that regardless of the obstacles we face in our life, we can choose to be loving and kind and compassionate to ourselves and others. We can attempt to find a peaceful place within us that maybe transcends the suffering at points. And we can relish every moment regardless.
I think we really need to practice that one. And I also think that we misinterpret a lot of times these we call them quote unquote bad emotions or bad feelings as the suffering or the cause of the suffering. But what I've noticed in some of my deep grieving, and I explain this a lot to some of my clients, but the ability to allow that grief to really be felt, and you go like to the center of it, open up your space, relax deeply as you can, and allow that grief to be in there. That grief doesn't have to be suffering. And it doesn't feel wonderful. It feels awful, but I think that you can train yourself to allow yourself to feel it so deeply that it, I hate saying this again, but I've said it in podcast before this, but if you feel it deeply enough, you can sense a bliss in the very middle of it. It's like being in the middle of a hurricane.
Yes.
Is how I have experienced this. And what I've noticed is, like, if you get like just these kind of run-of-the-mill emotions, the day-to-day emotions, you don't really get to have a hurricane. But when you get these huge, monstrous emotions, and it could be really good emotions, big, but it's the big emotions, the ones that just seem like they have a bigger aura, bigger range around you than just your physical body. It feels like your body's expanding, and grief kind of feels like it's going infinitely in, and you're like going like doubling up in pain. But I've noticed that in all those really strong emotions, there's a sense of bliss that's available. And to me, it was life-changing. It didn't make, so if emotions come and go, like grief continued to come to me throughout that next, month or two. But in my good training, I practiced allowing that emotion to be there, stopping everything I'm doing and allowing it to be there. I heard really weird noises going through my throat and sometimes yelling weird things. I wasn't doing anything on purpose. All I was doing was concentrating on allowing grief to be there, course, tears coming down my face, doubled over against the wall, sliding down the wall. I remember all that. But in that moment was just infinite. It was an infinite space. And is it possible to feel bliss? It wasn't a physical bliss. It was just a profound, so in the moment that caused me to feel a sense of existential bliss.
That's beautifully said. And I've had so many clients say similar things. I think along with the beautiful, powerful stuff you're saying, it also humanizes us to other people. It helps us be there for other people when they're suffering. It helps us understand the range and realm of human emotion and experience. Mm-hmm. It helps us not be full of ourselves at times. It gives us a sense of humility. And I wouldn't wish suffering on anybody, mm-hmm. nor would I tell anybody who was suffering something glib like, oh, you'll learn lessons. That's not very helpful for people,
right?
For sure. I mean, that's the meta message is I don't want to deal with your pain. I'm just going to give you some glib line off a poster in a guidance counselor's office or something.
Or but here, just take these meds. Here's your medication.
Does enrich us deeply as human beings. And this is where we talked about the Dalai Lama, talked about Nelson Mandela, talked about people who've been through tremendous suffering. It gives them a sense of humanity. And usually it gives them a deep, deep conviction towards service to humanity, whether it's to prevent other people from suffering. But at the very least, all of the problems any of us have, people have had since human beings started walking around on 2 feet 150,000 years ago. It doesn't take away the pain, whether it's physical problems, whether it's emotional problems, losing a child, PTSD, combat fatigue, whatever problems we face, just to know other people have faced these too. And so many of us have, and I haven't faced the sort of problems some of my clients have and many people have, but what amazes me is to think about how we've all kind of come to the same lessons in different ways over the years, but all we have is this moment. Mm-hmm. All we have is our capacity to choose what we focus on. The Serenity Prayer may sound trite, but it's probably the truest thing ever said or written in some ways. Mm-hmm. We have to let go of what we can't change. And wise men and women, many far wiser than me, have all come to the same conclusion. We need to let go of the stuff that's not working for us. We need to be sensitive, compassionate human beings. We need to do the best we can. I'm not trying to put a silver lining on it. I feel for these things in life. But to get back to your point about suffering and all, we can't fight suffering. We can't make suffering go away. We have to accept it to the extent that we can and learn from it. There's wisdom in all experiences. Help it make us better people. And lately I've been reading a lot that's been written about people that are dying, people with cancer. And some of the stuff much of the stuff that I read brings tears to my eyes. They don't want to die. Maybe they're in physical pain. Some of them have said they found an inner peace because it stripped away their outward identities or some of their irrational fears. Sometimes they talk about learning about the humanity of other people on a deeper level. People are loving and giving. Maybe they get great care. And I'm not glorifying. I'm not trying to put a silver lining on it. I feel for these people. But there's wisdom in all experiences.
I think that is the closing quote. Say that again.
There's wisdom in all experiences.
Say it again.
And if we choose to learn it and glean from it, but again, when I'm suffering, I don't want somebody to come by, oh, you'll learn from it and move ahead. I mean, that's for us to discover, for us to experience, for us to share. And it's
when we're ready.
Excuse me?
When we're ready. It's for us to experience and share and learn from when we're ready.
When we're ready to do it. Absolutely.
That's where the wisdom comes from.
Absolutely. And then we can share that wisdom with other people and help create a better world with less suffering and more knowledge.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Another great session with our friend Nate Terrell. How about your book and your website? Why don't you go through that for us?
Yes, I wrote a book called Achieving Self-Compassion, Giving Yourself the Gifts of Happiness and Inner Peace. It's available from Amazon.com. I have a website, www.achieving selfcompassion.com, which lists my portals, which has all of my blogs and articles I've written. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can sign up for self-compassion coaching. And I also have a Facebook page, Achieving Self-Compassion, where you can share your own experiences with self-compassion. I want to spend a lot of energy the rest of my life writing and talking about this topic. As I've been very fortunate to have the good things I've had in my life, and I want to spread as much goodwill as I can. And that's hopefully what my book's doing and my website is doing. So I welcome any of you to read my book and give me feedback if you'd like. I welcome any of you to go to my website.
We're profoundly grateful that you spent time with us today, Nate, and looking forward to our next conversation. It's always a pleasure.
And I learned a lot from you too.
Thanks, Nate.
Welcome to InnerZension Radio.